Hi, Jason Roberts here. Today we have a very special guest with us.
I'm Cliff Barackman. I was on a TV show called Finding Bigfoot for 9 years. Perhaps you've seen it. And now I'm the owner and curator of the North American Bigfoot Center, which is pretty much the Pacific Northwest's only Bigfoot museum. And that's down in Boring, Oregon, outside of Portland.
Today we're going to learn how to make a Bigfoot casting. Nothing gives me more anxiety than the thought of finding a Sasquatch footprint in the woods and then screwing up on the casting. So Cliff is here to help us with that today.
And it's really important to practice, which is what we're going to do today. Because if you find a real Sasquatch print in the ground, you're probably going to screw it up, man. That's just the way it goes, because that's the way the Bigfoot luck runs. Usually pretty bad, bad luck. So we're going to go out and practice and do a little instructional video. And maybe one of you can get a cast and share it.
All right, thanks for joining us. This is going to be fun. So I'm kind of wondering what kinds of areas would you find Sasquatch footprints in?
That's a really great question, actually, because Sasquatch feet aren't like a lot of the other animal feet around. Because you find a lot of elk prints and a lot of deer prints because they had a hard hoof, and all that weight is pressed down on a small area, so there's a lot of pressure there. But Sasquatches, even though they're very heavy, have a very large, soft, padded, flexible foot, and a lot of times their impressions are very subtle and hard to see. So you have to have really good substrate to be able to notice them at all. So we're looking at sandy areas like along rivers or beaches, that sort of thing. We're looking at swamps, muddy areas, maybe roads that haven't been graveled over yet, that kind of thing.
I was talking to Antone, and he was asking, who's this guy? Because he recognized you, and he goes, what's his name? I'm like, Cliff. Yeah, there was some footprints down at Sacred Lands, down at the fishing hole.
So I can't actually believe the timing of that. I mean, we were just in a restaurant and somebody happened to overhear us talking, and there just happened to be some Sasquatch footprints that showed up a couple days ago.
I'm super excited. This has not happened very often, and about once a month in the museum, maybe a little bit less, once every other month, somebody comes in and says, yeah, we saw one yesterday, or there's footprints here and there. We always chase them down. But to be at a spot on accident, on the Macaw Reservation here and saying, oh yeah, there's some footprints over there yesterday, day before.
This is Cliff. He's a Sasquatch investigator.
My name's Cliff.
Hi, Cliff.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Bill
What's your name?
Parkin.
Bill? Nice to meet you, Bill.
So you ever hear anything out here? Or?
Not with the dogs here now.
Yeah.
We
So I'm
don't
surprised there would be some footprints on that side over there, because I know how German Shepherds are.
Yeah, we can go and see.
When you're looking for Sasquatch sign of any sort, or whether we're talking about footprints or foraging sign, you're looking for things that look out of place, which is why I encourage people to research areas that they're familiar with, because they're the ones who are going to know if something is out of place. I think it's a good idea to go to the same research locations as much as possible, or if you're lucky enough to have Bigfoots in your proverbial backyard, that's the spot you want to focus on. Sasquatches are subtle, to say the very least, so their signs are equally subtle.
One thing that was brought up in one of our traditional stories is that obviously Sasquatches are presumably really strong, and they could literally tear apart a house or a car or anything, but it doesn't seem like they behave like that.
Yeah, Sasquatches would be phenomenally strong, to say the least. I mean, think about chimpanzees, right? These 4 foot tall, apes, basically. And they have the strength of, 8 to 10 times of a grown adult human, a human male. So those guys are 8 times stronger than I'll ever be. What would these guys be? Just tremendously, off the charts, ridiculously strong. So yeah, they could tear apart anything. They're made for it, ripping apart logs and breaking things and tearing the haunches off of deer without any tools. So yeah, Sasquatches could just wreak havoc upon the landscape or houses or people or anything. But the fact that they don't says something about the way they generally behave. Benign, shy, reclusive animals. So you don't want to mess with them. Give them the same berth as you would, say, a grizzly bear. But if they were out to get us, there'd be very few of us left. You know,
frustrating part I think about like trying to find a Sasquatch footprint, if their strides are like say 6 feet long, I mean you could easily miss it if they happen to be walking across something hard like that and they don't happen to be stepping in something soft like this right here.
Yeah, well, and keep in mind also their intelligence. I believe, and a lot of other people believe this as well, that they avoid leaving footprints in places that'll record footprints. So they're going to be stepping on the rocks and the logs and whatever else, getting across all this. If we find one in the sand or the mud, we're very lucky.
We found out the prints are on the other side of the river, so we got to head over there now. We found out that the footprints that we're seeing were just down here in the riverbed, and it was a few days ago. We're going to go down and see if we can still find them. Another investigator has already been in here and checked them out. So would Sasquatch be able to leave a footprint in something like this right here?
Yeah, but notice how like there's a boot print right here, right? You can tell it's a boot. There's the heel. There's a forepart of the foot.
Yeah.
But even that, assuming that it had to be in the last couple of days, even that is becoming more and more subtle as gravity and the elements kind of take a hold of it. So we will keep our fingers crossed.
Oh, wow.
But it might not be. It looks like a bear, though.
It almost looks like, I mean, this whole thing could be a...
Yeah, well, these are, that's a dog right there. That's coyotes or something like that, unless somebody has a dog running around here. That's what this is. But this does have the suggestions of toes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But we need more, because a lot of... I mean, I'm not an expert tracker. I'm a hobbyist. And I know that I'm not an expert tracker because I've had the good fortune of tracking with expert trackers, and they just put me to shame. So, but at the same time, this looks very encouraging. You know what I like is that the heel here is kind of rounded. It's actually a rounded heel, whereas the back foot of a bear is kind of, it has a point to it. It comes down, not a sharp point, but a point nonetheless. So let's...
That looks fresher than a couple days ago, though, doesn't it?
Maybe. Well, the ground's so hard. I don't know. Let's take a look. So it's traveling this way.
There's a deer right there, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
So I'm surprised. I mean, there's like houses not too far away, but it looks like this area is frequently traveled by a lot of different kinds of animals.
Yeah, well, Bigfoots don't care. I mean, you only own your property during the day.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. So does it seem like they're more nocturnal then?
Yeah. The Sasquatches are largely, but not exclusively, nocturnal. And that has been determined by sighting reports. If you look at all the sighting reports statistically, about 60% happen during the day, 40% at night. But just for argument's sake, and you'll see why in a minute, let's say that's 50-50, okay? Because it's close. How many more people are out during the day versus night?
Yeah.
How far can those people see during the day versus night? Say, even if it's 10 times fewer people and they can see 10 times less far, that still indicates 100 times more Sasquatch activity, like using real rough numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm inclined to think that they're largely nocturnal, but not exclusively. And this whole place is vacant for 12 hours a day, pretty much, right?
What are some similarities you've seen between all the different footprints that you've seen, you know, as far as size, locations, areas?
Sasquatch feet are only superficially like human feet. Yeah, like we say they look human-like, but bigger because they have a big toe that goes straight ahead. The fancy word for that is adducted. Whereas apes have a big toe that goes to the side, like a thumb, right, called abducted. I always remember because abnormal.
Yeah.
Again, that kind of thing. That's how I remember that prefix there. But Sasquatch feet aren't really that human-like. They're much wider in proportion to the length, and also they have a flexibility in the mid part of their foot that we don't have. Human feet have an arch in them. It's called a longitudinal arch. And Sasquatch feet don't have that. Just like no other ape species and most other human ancestors also don't have that arch. They've retained flexibility in the mid part of their foot, whereas we don't have it. That arch holds it steady and stiff. We have those bones, we have all the joints and stuff, we just can't bend it. They can still bend theirs, which makes a lot of sense for the kind of environment they live in, because if this is their foot and this is the forepart of their foot, they can lift their heel up.
Wow.
Like that, just like all the other apes can, by the way. And sometimes when they push off, that raises a mound of dirt at a weird place in the footprint. Whereas that mound of dirt in human prints is actually forward on the foot, but Sasquatch's is about halfway back. Not all prints show that, but if you have 30 or 40 prints in a row, a couple of them are gonna, that's for sure. And think about going up and down slopes like this, and clearly Sasquatches feel very much at home in rough terrain like that. Going up and down slopes like that, wouldn't it be nice to have a foot that bent in the middle so you can retain maximum surface area in contact with the ground as you're moving around? That's a very nice adaptation for a Sasquatch or anything that lives in this kind of terrain.
So how would that benefit you if you're going like down the hill?
Down the hill, I think it's just their great weight, essentially, and also they've been seen using their arms quite a bit, going up or downhill. You know, you pulling on saplings and stuff going down, or going down yet holding on the back. You know, but going straight down, I guess that it could act as a brake, right? And the heel would also retain contact with the ground to some degree as well. So again, maximize the surface area, minimize the slippage. I think this is the area, not only because of the background in the video and all that stuff, but also somebody, I believe, put a bunch of sticks around this area and a lot of things are pushed down here. People have been walking around in here. Sasquatches are hard to track, but people are a lot easier to track. There's been a lot of people in this area. Looking at the ground though, underneath the grass, it's actually pretty hard. It's hard packed sand and mud. The animals have been moving around here. Maybe some of these are people and stuff. There's some interesting things that look pretty good, but nothing real big. Yeah, so if a Sasquatch did walk through here, I hope the previous investigators did their job and recorded some of it. Besides just that video that something happened, like I want to see footprint photographs and all that sort of stuff. Nobody cast anything here, so I'm assuming that there's no depth to anything that they saw. I would have to assume a researcher would do that. So I guess that they are coming up as empty-handed as we are.
So because of the depth of this, I would have never even thought of trying to do a cast on this because it's so shallow. But these are the kind of details that you learn from a professional.
Or from some TV show hack. Looking at it now, I think this is probably a bear. But we can cast it, why not? And we can treat this as a juvenile Sasquatch print, and maybe it is one. But here's what I know. This is what I've learned over the years. Sometimes by looking at a footprint in the ground, you can tell a lot. But if you cast it, more information can be squeezed out of it, like water from a rag. And sometimes the casts show details you can't see. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the cast looks terrible, but it's like, I saw the toes with my own eyes, and they don't show up in the cast. So we're going to do both, just like you should. We should do both. We're going to photograph this, and we're going to cast it and see what we get. Casting should be broken down basically into two main steps. And by the way, this is the quick and easy version. You can get as nerdy and deep into this as you want. First thing we're going to do is take some photographs of it. Always take photographs and then plaster it up. Do both. Do both. I cannot emphasize that enough. I'm going to take a minimum of 5 pictures of each footprint cast. If I had 30 of these things, I would need 150 pictures at least, right? 5 of each print in the ground at least. And that's because if you just do one, it kind of doesn't give us the three-dimensionality of it. Whereas if we have at least 5, that's even better. Or you could do a video of each one. Videos actually show the depth a lot better than any number of photographs could. Take one picture from above. Take one picture from about 45-degree angle, a foot or two away. Then do the other side. And then front. And I bet you guessed the last one. By looking at these 5 pictures, it kind of gives you a sense of like how deep it is, and you can kind of see the three-dimensionality of it instead of just a two-dimensional photograph, right? Another good thing you can do if you want, if you have the memory in your phone, is you could do a video. And all I'm going to do is just slowly change directions with that scale item in there. Kind of circle it around a bit, and that also gives a sense of the depth. And that is a three-dimensional sort of thing. The big takeaways here, the big takeaways. Have the scale item in the picture and take a bunch of pictures. After you have thoroughly documented the footprint impression in the ground, the next thing you should do, of course, is cast it, which really isn't that hard.
So you say it's not that hard, but I actually would have extreme amount of anxiety in thinking about trying it, because I don't know the first thing to do, especially with a shallow cast that only has about maybe quarter of an inch depth, maybe eighth of an inch depth.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, I'm thinking, what are you gonna get out of it? Like a little pancake with a wafer, like a cracker wafer or something.
You don't know what you're going to get out of it until you do it. I heard somebody last year say that, like, what's one more cast going to teach us? We don't know until we get the cast, because every time we get the cast, we learn a little bit more. And I say pushing that ball just another foot down the field counts every single time.
So I got a couple things for you today. This is a Bigfoot casting kit.
Should we use it?
Yeah, we'll try it out. I don't even know what's in it.
Cool.
So Ken Hamilton from the Sasquatch Legend store in Forks, Washington sent these over to me. And I told him I'd use them in a video. And so I don't know what's in them yet. So I got one, you got one.
Well, we'll see. That's a good store and a really cool guy too, by the way.
I made up some smoked salmon, so you got a snack for the way home.
Nice.
Or if you're hungry right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And of course, I have this for you. It's a January 1991 footprint from the Blue Mountains of the Oregon-Washington border, taken right outside of Walla Walla, Washington. This cast was obtained by a gentleman named David Bean, who recently passed away this past year, or year before, but I think it was this past year. He was an excellent tracker. He was actually employed, I think, by the government for man tracking, along with Wes Summerlin and some other Bigfoot, luminaries and royalty over that direction. So
you're telling me that almost all the Sasquatch footprints have this distinctive arch in the
Not
middle?
almost all. No. But many of them will. Many of them will. You see, a footprint is not the shape of the foot. It's the shape of the damage done to the ground by the foot.
Oh, well.
Right? So sometimes it comes down flat and just stays flat. Sometimes, depending on the slope of the ground, the speed the animal is walking at the time, the water content of the ground, what direction the Sasquatch is looking at the time, all those factors weigh in to change the shape of the impression into the ground.
Yep. So I wonder if there's like Sasquatch that have duck feet or in toes, or have you seen any differences at all?
I've seen a couple trackways. They're very much in line, a little bit of straddle, but very much in line. And that probably is when they're walking a little bit more quickly. And it almost certainly has to do with their center of gravity as they're moving forward.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. So they're not going to walk with a wide stance because if they weigh 700-800 pounds, 600 pounds, if they walked like that, then they would have this real back and forth movement. But so they have to almost keep their feet like that.
Right. So it's a center of gravity thing. But when they're not moving very fast, I've actually followed trackways that were that had a fair amount of straddle in them. So a little bit of both, just like us, I think humans, and we're all guilty of this, humans sometimes get into very rigid thinking. Because we're talking about very often animals like rats or dogs or something, and you can kind of group a lot of dogs together, a lot of rats together, but Sasquatches are individuals. They're kind of a lot like us in that way, that one Sasquatch might be curious and playful, another one might be a total jerk.
So now we're going to do a unboxing of what's in a Bigfoot casting kit here.
Oh, they have a little flyer explaining a little bit about casting, some directions on the back, and it looks to me like they have just a little bit of plaster. You probably want about twice this much or more for like a big Sasquatch footprint. We have some plastic gloves. That could be important, it could not be important. I don't generally use them. I try to keep my hands wet though, because plaster is an exothermic reaction, which means it releases heat and it could burn you. And of course, a mixing stick. What they don't have is a ruler. They should have that too. But I guess if you're casting it, then perhaps that's less important. Not bad. Let's use it.
If you don't have a casting kit like this, what kind of materials can be used for casting?
Well, the best material to use for recording a Sasquatch footprint is whatever you can get a hold of, because the main focus has to be to get that information out of the ground and record it in plaster. Make a cast of it. So don't get hung up on, I didn't have the right kind of material. Anything you can use. Plaster works great. It's probably the cheapest stuff. I have a Home Depot nearby me, so they sell this stuff called Fix-It-All. It's in a green, white, and yellow package. Fix-It-All is really nice. I even have had casts sent to me for duplication that were recorded in some sort of Quickcrete. Whatever it takes, get that out of the ground. So plaster's fine.
Concrete?
Well, Quickcrete, some sort of it wasn't quite concrete.
Oh yeah, I know it's a fast-drying concrete.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This was a little like finer. I think Quickcrete has a lot of different products in that range. But if you have to, and if concrete's the only thing you have, Why not?
Yeah.
Get that out of the ground. At least you did your part. You know, it's so aggravating for me to hear about Bigfoot researchers who don't record footprints in plaster. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
So what's the shallowest footprint you can get a cast of?
You'd be very surprised. It could be less than 1/8 of an inch and still show something. You know, so one of Dr. Meldrum's prints from 1996, the 5-point trackway, is very, very, very shallow. So you can see that in the cast itself. And I said that, by the way, because I have copies. I can send you pictures.
So you would make a cast that just surrounded the whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely. You'd not only want to record the impression, the part that actually goes into the soil, but about a 1/2 inch or an inch or more around the outside of the impression as well, because that also records what kind of substrate that was left in. More information.
So could we maybe do that today? Is a record one like a shallow print, and you know how to do a deeper print?
Sure, we can do both. No problem.
All right. And then I kind of thoughts on my mind are like, well, what the right consistency, how much water to add when you're making a cast.
Yeah. It's not 50-50. I'll tell you that. Most of the time people think, oh, half water, half plaster. It's not 50-50. It's actually more like 55 or 60% powder and the rest is water.
Like pancake batter, but maybe just a little bit thicker.
You hit it, pancake batter. Don't get hung up on the minute details, because most likely if you try to do it, you'll probably end up being successful.
Well, great, let's get to it.
Okay. Now we're going to get to the casting part. Turns out, I was reading the directions just to see what they had to offer in here. This is Ultra Cal 30. This is good stuff. I'm just going to pour this directly into the bag. This might be a little too thin, but I don't know, whatever. I make mistakes all the time. And you will make mistakes too, by the way. So don't let that discourage you. If you screw up the first time, good. Second time, you're not going to make that same mistake. You'll probably make a different one. That's what I do. I make a different mistake every time I do it. Pretty liquidy, but I'm going to show you that it's okay. There's no mistake you can make, or very few mistakes you can make, that ruin everything. So now what I'm going to do, the quick and easy way, is simply lightly pour this in. If it's too liquidy like this mix is, it's just going to take longer to dry. Ooh, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this stick here to build like a little berm around, because when it's liquidy like this, it could run away and run out of the print. And all I'm doing is raising the soil in places that it looks like it's going to flow down without affecting the shape of the print underneath. It's not that hard to do. You just got to take a little time, a little care. And I'll find out pretty quick where I didn't do it well enough, because the plaster will tell me. Now this footprint here that we just cast is actually very, very shallow, probably less than 1/8 of an inch, but it still should be cast. So we did it because we're doing our research job, right? So, but this is going to take half hour or so to set up, even to the point where we can remove it from the ground. Now it's been about 10 minutes or so, and remember I said that the mixture that I had in here was a little bit too watery? I waited, because plaster hardens over time. Wait about 10-15 minutes. Now this is the consistency I like. Pancake batter. And in fact, I'm going for thick pancake batter now, because I want to thicken up this cast a little bit. It's so thin, the cast could break. Well, I'm going to think ahead of time and take some precautions here and thicken it up.
Oh wow, that really did set up.
Yeah, there's no mistake you can make that can't be fixed, is the lesson here. The only mistake you can't fix is not trying to cast it. And you'll be kicking yourself in your own butt for the rest of your life for not trying.
So since we don't have an actual footprint to cast, Cliff volunteered to step into the mud here.
Somewhat of a foot fetish video. From my experience, I already know that this is going to be too much plaster. But you may not know that, because you might be new at this. Too much is always better than not enough. So use what you have, don't worry so much about it. Don't worry about the small things, and most things are small things. Except for a Bigfoot footprint. They're big. You might be asking, how do I know how much to put in? the way I think about it is I say, okay, well, how much plaster, if I just poured plaster powder into the print, how much would it take to fill the entire print? Something like that. It's probably a little bit too much, but too much is better than not enough. So I'm doing it. Yeah, Bob Titmus, man, when he cast those 10 prints at the Patterson Gimlin film site, he was trying to stretch out the plaster. He just did a shell on the bottom of it. They're actually concave. They're hollow on the back. Wow. And he put down toilet paper to help reinforce it.
Huh. So I didn't know that the Patterson video had footprints to go with it and everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Roger and Bob cast 2 that day, a left and a right. And then Bob Titmus found the site, like I said, 9 or 10 days later, and he cast 10 footprints in a row, irregardless of quality, no matter how good or bad they were.
So did they get any good quality prints out of it?
Oh yeah, some of the best information. Actually, as far as real Sasquatch evidence goes, more footprints were documented at the Patterson Gimlin film site than anywhere else since. There were 16 all between the footprint casts, or 12 footprint casts, and 4 more prints that that have photographs of them.
So there's a lot of people that have disbelief and, well, of course, believe the Patterson video. Do you lean one way or the other?
Well, God, I mean, the Patterson Gimlin film is real. It's 100% real. People have tried to duplicate it using modern technology. They can't. To put it in perspective, Planet of the Apes came out I think 4 months after the film was obtained. It came out in February. They filmed it in October. So and Planet of the Apes, the very original one, it won an Academy Award for special effects from the ape suits. You tell me, man, does that look like a Planet of the Apes ape suit? No, it does not. Dr. Meldrum actually shows the footage to his anatomy classes and says, identify all the muscle masses you can see moving. And they do. The footprints are 100% real. The film's 100% real. Roger and Bob accidentally gave us all something that we wish we had. A really good daylight clear observation of a Sasquatch. This is thickening up really nicely. It's totally thick pancake batter right now. This is what I want. Yeah, look how nice that's flowing. Nice and thick. Notice how I'm going outside of the toes, outside of the footprint, about an inch or so. I'm recording the substrate. There you go.
So how much longer are we going to have to wait for these casts?
Generally speaking, you want to wait about 30 to 45 minutes, and you can always test it, of course. Feel the back of it. It's going to feel green, as I say, a lot of moisture content, but you can feel the back, and when it's hard, you can tap at it and it clicks and all that. It feels like a rock. Then you can remove it.
Do you have any tips for anybody pulling one of these for the first time?
Yeah, actually I do. This is the hardest part about all of this. You can fix a bad mix of plaster. You can build a dam so it doesn't overflow. You can fix most of your mistakes, except for not trying. But here's where it's like the one sketchy spot. Because if you don't do this, I'll say do it right, it's going to break. And that's a bum out. It's still fixable. We can glue the cast back together. But you don't want to break a cast. You spent all this time doing it. We've been waiting for 45 minutes for it to set up. So you want to do this right. And I've broken casts. It happens, man. You're going to make mistakes. But this is what I find is the best way to avoid breaking a cast. I have a shovel. I always have a shovel in my car, just for a situation like this. So I am going to dig around about this far out. So that's what, probably 3 inches, 2 or 3 inches out. I'm going to dig straight down. And do that kind of a lot around the outside. Oops, there's rocks there. You see how the whole thing is moving? That's a good sign. That's what you want. If only a little bit of it's moving, then it might break, but so push down. Those rocks down there. So you want to get deep underneath the cast. Yeah, okay, I can't get down that deep here. Oh, there you go. All right, good. You have to go down deep because if you do it shallow, the pressure of the shovel is going to break the cast. But in this case, see how the entire cast is moving. I'm just kind of shimmying it back and forth so the whole thing is moving. And then lift it up.
Wow.
See, this is the most dangerous part of the whole casting process, is getting it out of the ground. And it's not that hard. You just have to get down deep underneath the cast, probably 6 inches underneath, and then wiggle the shovel back and forth. Do it as many sides as you need to around the cast so you get that whole thing wiggling, and then you can slowly lift it up in one piece. Now from here, you'd be very, very tempted, because you just cast a super cool Bigfoot cast and you want to take a look at it. You'd be tempted to take a brush and start cleaning all this gunk off. Don't. You can take your hands and clean off this junk. That's all fine. But the best way to do it, smells like a slough. It is one. But anyway, but the best way to do this is actually just leave all that junk on there. Leave it on there for 3 or 4 or 5 days until it's totally dry. Because right now the plaster is what we call green. There's still a lot of moisture content in there. And there's gonna be moisture content in the plaster for days. So find a warm spot, maybe a corner of the house, maybe in the garage somewhere. Get some air circulating around it. And then you hose it off with the hose. Psst, water, the garden hose. That's how you clean this. Don't take a brush to it. If you take a brush to it, you can introduce brush lines in it. And then people might misconstrue that as like fingerprints, dermatoglyphics. So just take a hose and hose it down, but wait a few days. I'm going to let Jason deal with that. It's easy. I'm sure he can handle it.
So in this area where there was supposed to be some footprints the other day, we would have been able to tell that there was a cast made, because there would have been obviously digging spots where the cast was dug out.
Yes.
Possibly some plaster that had accidentally been spilled in the sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And nobody cast anything over where we were looking. Maybe we're in a totally different place. I don't think so, though. I think this is it. Not only based on the video, but based on the fact that all sorts of people were tromping around, and those sticks didn't line up like that on accident.
Yeah.
So
this is actually a lot heavier than I thought it was going to be. And
imagine like a 16-inch print.
So
be like 8 pounds.
It's a good thing that's not the smell of your feet.
I know. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm responsible for the smell of this slough. I've been camping for days, right?
Oh. Okay, well, thanks again.
My pleasure, Jason.